Ryuji gazed over a field filled with healthy crops, and he noticed that they were growing well. His comrade Rene thanked him and his enchantment for it. The mud golem powered by magic stones kept away monsters and animals, and with the growth-promoting magic stones, the crops were flourishing. Ryuji also credited Rene for her potions as they improved the soil. Rene was speechless, but she thanked Ryuji. Just then, an elf girl named Rana called out to them, telling them that dinner was ready. In perfect contentment, Ryuji, as an enchanter, was determined to live a leisurely life with everyone. Just then, he and Rene turned to Rana, and they told her they would be there. Ryuji was summoned by Guy, their party leader, and he asked what it was for. All their other companions were out on requests, so he decided to take a day off. Just then, Guy cut him off, saying that as of that day, he was out of the party. Ryuji was confused, so Guy asked him if he didn't realize how useless he was in combat. Ryuji admitted he was useless, as he was a support enchanter after all. He reminded Guy that he was told to focus on producing magic stones to enhance everyone. He could only enchant people on sight, which made him wonder if that wasn't enough. Besides, expecting him to perform like Manori or Suzu, the party's swordsman and mage, was difficult. Guy couldn't expect him to do the same work. Just then, Guy lashed out, as it was the reason why they couldn't raise their ranks. They were second class, but Ryuji was still stuck at third class. Berserk couldn't be recognized as a second-class party. At that rate, Ryuji should just forget aiming for first class. They would be stuck at third class forever. However, Ryuji only winked at his current crisis. Guy had incorporated his stepsisters Manori and Suzu into the party they originally formed with him. Guy had approached them from the start, and this made Ryuji realize that Guy had intended to kick him out. Having Sean take Manori and Suzu out that morning was part of the plan. However, Guy told Ryuji not to accuse people based on speculation, although he did believe that trash should be thrown out. At that moment, Ryuji went along with Guy. He understood him, but he asserted that he was the one who wanted out. He would be taking back all the magic stones that he lent to Guy. Imagine quitting and hitting reverse Uno on the way out. Guy was confused and asked what he was talking about, and he reminded Ryuji that the magic stones were shared party property. Just then, Ryuji took out their contract, showing Guy that the written agreement, when he handed over the stones, said loan, not transfer. If Guy didn't return them, he was prepared to take the issue to court. Left with no choice, Guy returned all of the magic stones. Ryuji took a long, good look at all of them, but he noticed that the sublimation stone was missing. For someone who looked down on enchanters, Guy surely relied on magic stones. Furious, Guy told Ryuji to shut up. He threw the stone, asking if it was good enough. Ryuji skillfully caught the stone with one hand, playfully commending Guy for a nice throw. That completed all of the stones, and so he bid Guy goodbye. He also told him to give his regards to Manori and Suzu. After that intense encounter, Ryuji went to a pub. That said, he had some funds but had no concrete plans. Plus, he was leaving his stepsisters behind like that. However, he quickly changed his mindset as there was no use dwelling on it. With their skills, they should be fine and they could just meet up later. Anyway, whatever he did, he needed to start by making connections. Just then, his thoughts were put to a halt when he heard someone complaining nearby. The person claimed that they no longer wanted to team up with somebody. A girl named Rene asked her teammate Marie why. Frustrated, Marie explained that Rene was an alchemist, but all she made were potions. Girl, that's literally the job description. It was too much of a burden on her to complete requests. Ryuji had overheard everything, which made him wonder if getting kicked out was a trend. However, he knew this wasn't his problem. Rene told Marie that she was not useful in combat, so she made attack potions. Marie angrily said that was exactly the problem. She had to fight to get results and then share the rewards with Rene, who didn't even contribute. It was utterly ridiculous. Besides, she had already decided to join Berserk, so Rene was on the way out. Marie didn't wait for Rene to respond, and she promptly left. Having seen everything, Ryuji approached Rene, asking if he could join her. Rene, who had been crying, asked Ryuji who he was. Ryuji replied that he was the one her companion was transferring to. He was the guy who got kicked out of Berserk. Ryuji apologized, as he didn't mean to eavesdrop. Rene wanted to say it was alright, but before she could, Ryuji went on to introduce himself. He told her his name, adding that he was a third-class enchanter. Rene introduced herself, also that she was a third-class alchemist. She shared that her party had just disbanded, and she started crying again. Just then, Ryuji handed her a handkerchief, telling her to wipe her tears first. He guessed that she must have a lot on her mind, but they were both outcasts now. He suggested drinking for now, which Rene agreed to. However, she was underage, so she couldn't drink alcohol. She wanted to join him though. As they spent time together, Ryuji told Rene everything that happened to him. Guy, their leader, told him to leave. Coincidentally, he and Rene were on the same boat. Just then, Rene told Ryuji to call her casually, and Ryuji wanted the same thing. However, Ryuji was younger, and seemed to want to use honorifics. Just then, Ryuji asked Rene that if she didn't mind, He wanted her to show him one of her potions. He was curious about what she could make. Rene was excited and she agreed to it. She showed him 2 unique bottles of her potions, sharing that they were some of her recent creations. Ryuji held one of them, but Rene warned him that while it was safe to touch the bottles, he shouldn't touch the lids or pins. Ryuji seemed surprised, but he understood. Rene explained that one of the potions took a lot of time and she was particularly proud of it. She then began to explain the key points, but Ryuji was occupied by his own thoughts. The exterior of the potion didn't seem unusual, and as for the contents, he wanted to use his magic to take a look. He used his appraisal skill and found that it was some sort of mix between fire and a bomb. Just then he realized what it actually was, an effect that could create flames. The range was 1m radius and the power and duration amazed him. He then told Rene that it was more powerful than Suzu's, Berserk's mage's magic. Rene was surprised and she thought there was no way that was possible. It had nearly 4 times the output and duration of Suzu's, who was called a genius mage. If Ryuji added his enchantment to it, it would be even more powerful. Ryuji asked if making it was quite something and Rene agreed with him. However, Marie had told her that the material costs were no joke. She admitted it was a bit of a strain and she wanted to make good things. She wanted to make the best, and if it could help someone in need, that would be wonderful. Ryuji fell silent. Then he agreed she was right. They might be 2 of a kind, which somehow confused Rene. As an enchanter, Ryuji took pride in his skills and creations. That was why, when their value was fully realized, that moment would be incredibly satisfying. Rene was hyped up by his speech, but before she could say anything else, Ryuji's attention shifted to an argument nearby. A bald adventurer complained to the waiter that the situation was ridiculous. After completing a request, he always had beer and meat. He boasted that he was a second-class adventurer, and he angrily asked the waiter if he knew who was responsible for the town's prosperity. The waiter explained that the meat the adventurer ordered was a rare cut and they currently didn't have it. Ryuji wondered what was going on and he noticed that the timing was just perfect. Rene noticed that the adventurer was quite drunk as the smell was so strong. She asked Ryuji what they should do, so he thought of a plan. Just then, Ryuji said that it wouldn't be fair to make a proposal without showing his hand. He grabbed one of Rene's potions and said he'd borrow it. She was a bit surprised, but Ryuji didn't wait for her consent. Just then, Ryuji approached the adventurer, who seemed to know him. The adventurer asked what he wanted, but Ryuji said nothing. Only that he thought the adventurer could keep it down since they were trying to drink in peace. The adventurer thought Ryuji had some nerve and he asked what his rank was. Ryuji replied that he was a 3rd-class enchanter, which made the adventurer scoff. He was a 3rd class and an enchanter to boot. He was merely someone who didn't even fight on the front lines, and he was acting all high and mighty. Rene anxiously observed while Ryuji stood his ground. He sighed, saying that Guy was the same, but everyone was always going on about ranks. He thought there were other important things too. The adventurer was furious, and he wasted no time in swinging his fist. He was angry at Ryuji for muttering nonsense and ruining his drink. This was the perfect opportunity for Ryuji to show his enchanting wind magic. Whirlwind. The adventurer deserved it for laughing at him for not fighting on the front lines. Just then, a huge wave of wind and flames erupted, rendering the adventurer helpless as he was sent flying. Ryuji showed no mercy, and he declared that this was the pride of craftsmen. As the dust settled, the adventurer was sent crashing to the floor. Ryuji stared at him, making the adventurer quiver and bolt away. Homie got yeeted so hard he unlocked airplane mode. Everyone was shocked by what they witnessed, especially Rene. The people commended Ryuji for being awesome, and although they didn't know what he had just done, they still thought it was incredibly powerful. Suddenly Rene approached him, attempting to verbalize how amazed she was. However, Ryuji cut her off, smiling as he suggested paying and leaving the place. They couldn't talk calmly there. Shortly after, they went to a nearby fountain. There, Ryuji told Rene that her potion was as amazing as he thought. If he had used it as it was, the tavern would be blown away. As Rene had suspected, that was Ryuji's enchantment. He confirmed it and explained that he had enchanted it with wind magic. To prevent the flames from spreading, he gave it directionality and compressed it with wind to reduce its power so the guy wouldn't be seriously injured. With that, he told Rene that if they applied enchantments to potions like that, they could amplify their effects or improve their usability. That was also why he wanted to ask her if she wanted to team up. Rene asked if this meant forming a party, but Ryuji said it was more than just that. As a craftsman, he had fallen for her creations. He wanted to set up a workshop together, combining their skills and living a life of leisure that everyone would envy. He wanted to show the world how amazing enchanters and alchemists could be. Rene was stunned, thinking about the possibilities of building a workshop together. Ryuji asked what she thought of it, as he believed it was not a bad proposal. Rene was teary-eyed and she said she would love to. Just then, Mr. Amon, the guildmaster, approached Ryuji, asking if it was true that he had left Berserk and would also leave town. Ryuji confirmed it was true, and even Rene was kicked out of her party. Rene suddenly thanked Mr. Emin for everything he had done for them. Mr. Emin said that the guild's policy was not to interfere in internal party disputes, but he couldn't help but wonder about Manori and Suzu. Rene recognized them, and Ryuji also told her that they were Berserk's swordsman and mage. They were also his stepsisters, which surprised Rene. With that, Ryuji told Mr. Emin to give something to his sisters without Guy finding out. Mr. Emin was speechless, but he agreed to pass it on. He then asked Ryuji where he planned to go from there. Ryuji shared that they were thinking of settling down in a distant town, and there they would set up a workshop together. Mr. Emin understood, and he was sure they would meet again. He told Ryuji to take care until then, and he reassured him that he would look after Manori and Suzu. Ryuji thanked Mr. Emin, and Rene told him to take care. After that, Ryuji and Rene started their journey. Just then, Rene asked Ryuji if they were going to Solstat, and he said yes. That place had a highway and a nearby magic stone mine, making it a perfect place to set up a workshop. It would take about half a month on foot, though. Rene realized it was going to be quite a long journey, even if it was to save on expenses. They had been kicked out and had no income source. It couldn't be helped in that case. They needed funds to set up the workshop too. However, Ryuji was optimistic, and he said they had plenty of time. He suggested taking it easy, and Rene thought it sounded good. With that, Ryuji looked forward to working with Rene, and she felt the same way. That night, somewhere in the deep forest, something sinister happened. A man approached a group of knights, and based on their armor, he guessed they were from the royal army. The man was a bandit, and he had some comrades with him. He then commented on the knights' fine attire, which he assumed was a gift from the taxpayers. The knights were alarmed by the bandits, and they told Lady Setsi to get behind them. The leader of the bandits warned that he wouldn't say it twice. He wanted them to leave all their valuables. Could this be a premonition of something happening before reaching the frontier? As Ryuji and Rene's journey went on, they decided to camp for the night. Rene guessed they would reach Solstat by the next day, and Ryuji agreed. Just then, she asked Ryuji why he became an enchanter. Ryuji said it was a long story, but he still shared it with her after setting up a campfire. There was an empire called Sakura at the eastern edge of the continent, which also happened to be his homeland. The country's name came from the cherry blossom, the national flower. They bloomed around that time of the year. Because of the civil war, Ryuji wasn't sure if that scenery could still be seen now. Rene was surprised to learn about the civil war, and Ryuji was saddened to confirm it. That was when he lost his parents, back when he was 12. He left the country with his sisters, Manori and Suzu, who also lost their families in the civil war. Rene thought it must have been tough, and Ryuji admitted it really was. However, their teacher took them in and taught them the skills to survive. Rene seemed curious about their teacher, but even Ryuji didn't know their name until the end, so they just called them teacher. They were strict, but they trained them in basic combat skills and simple magic techniques. It was their teacher who recognized Ryuji's aptitude for enchantment. Thanks to that, it was now his calling. Also, that teacher was an elf, just like Rene. That was one of the reasons why he couldn't leave her alone. He couldn't stand seeing her being used by those who didn't understand her true value. Ryuji guessed he had made her go along with his self-satisfaction, and he was sorry for that. He bowed before her, but Rene frantically told him to stop it. She said they were kindred spirits, so he shouldn't worry about it. Besides, at that time she was happy that he reached out to her. Ryuji was surprised, but he was relieved to know that everything was good. Just then, Ryuji remembered the medicine he showed Rene in the tavern. He wanted to show her some magic stones too, which she was eager to see. When Ryuji handed them to Rene, she was in awe. She asked if they were truly magic stones, as they looked like huge gems. Ryuji then told her that the effects depended on how well they were cut. From left to right, they were the adamantine stone, the severe cold stone, and the anti-magic stone. Then, just as Ryuji was about to explain the effects, Rene sensed something nearby. Ryuji asked what was wrong, and Rene said that she could hear something from a tree. There were voices arguing and metal clashing in that direction. She couldn't make out the conversation clearly, but from the way they were talking, they were probably bandits. All this talk about arguing voices and metal clashing at that distance was something they couldn't ignore. Ryuji thought that if bandits were involved, they might be targeted too. He insisted on helping, and he asked Rene if she could fight. She confirmed she could and would be fine, but they had to hurry. With that, Ryuji urged them to go. While they were at it, he wanted to show Rene the effects of the magic stones in action. Meanwhile, the battle between the knights and the bandits kept on. One of the bandits mocked a knight, asking why his movement had slowed down. The leader of the knights told his men not to falter, as they must protect Lady Setsi at all costs. Finally, Ryuji and Rene arrived at the scene. Rene pointed at the fight, and Ryuji confirmed he could see them. Just then, he asked Rene to draw their attention. Rene reassured him that he could leave it to her. Just then she used her magic to summon the arrow of flame, commanding it to pierce the enemy before her and burst into flames. The fire arrow was released, burning one of the bandits to a crisp. The leader of the bandits quickly noticed it and he suspected it was reinforcements for the knights. Suddenly, Ryuji appeared, sarcastically asking if he could join in. The bandit he faced called him a bastard, and he immediately went in for the kill. However, Ryuji intercepted the attack with his staff, and he kicked the bandit with immense force, sending him flying. Ryuji wondered if this was all they had. Compared to Minori's swordsmanship, this was child's play. Suddenly, the leader of the bandits approached from behind, telling Ryuji that his back was wide open. He slashed his sword at Ryuji, but to his shock, the weapon bounced back. Sword bounced off like, "Nah bro, I quit too." Ryuji stood there unfazed, while the knights and Lady Setsi were shocked. The leader of the bandits couldn't believe that the sword bounced off, so Ryuji broke it to him that he used the adamantine stone. Suddenly, he punched the bandit in his gut, explaining that the stone's effect was the nullification of physical attacks against the bearer. At that moment, Rene used her web of lightning to envelop the bandits. With her electric web, all the bandits were subdued. Ryuji then approached her, asking if that was all of them, to which she said yes. Rene approached one of the knights asking if they were all right. The knight confirmed they were, and he thanked her for her help. Just then, Lady Setsi approached them and was about to speak, but the knight warned her that she mustn't. Ryuji understood that there were circumstances, so he reassured them not to worry about it. They had only intervened to ensure their own safety while camping. The knight appreciated his consideration, and he told Ryuji to leave the handling of the bandits to them. Just then, Rene approached the knight, hoping that she wasn't overstepping. She wanted to ask if he needed any healing medicine. Although his injuries seemed minor, there were still wounds and bleeding. The knight was unsure, which was something Ryuji understood. It was medicine offered by strangers, and it was only natural to be hesitant. Suddenly, Ryuji remembered that he had been scratched by some plants when they rushed in to help. It was perfect timing. He grabbed the medicine from Rene, which confused her. He then poured it on the scratch, reassuring the knight that there was nothing suspicious in it. He then asked if the knight wanted some. The other knights quickly jumped at the opportunity, prompting the leader to call them out. However, Lady Setsi told Diet, the leader, that it was fine. He deadass sounds like a salad. She reassured him that she would take responsibility if anything happened. He wanted to argue, but he was suddenly cut off when Ryuji spoke. He introduced himself and told them about his plans of opening a workshop in Solstat, and if they wanted the medicine, they should go visit them. After that, he explained to Rene that he responded appropriately, assuming they were nobles from the conversation, but he was sorry for involving her. He was also sorry for using the medicine without her permission. Rene thought the issue about the nobles was fine, but she pointed out that Ryuji startled her when he used the medicine so suddenly. Ryuji explained that it was natural for them to be curious, and as knights it was the right action. But even so, having Rene's goodwill doubted didn't feel good. He quickly walked away, but Rene was smiling behind him. She thought that it was so like him to act like that. Ryuji then stretched his muscles, saying it was late and that they should return to camp. Rene agreed and insisted they rest for the day and prepare for tomorrow. Solstat was located at the southwesternmost part of the continent, and it was a strategic point of the Bystein Kingdom because of its port, or so it should be. Strategic point for what? Seasonal depression? The town wasn't as lively as Ryuji had expected. Rene agreed, and even the Adventurers Guild was in that state. Ryuji then spoke to Anne, the clerk, and said that they would like to transfer there. However, he wondered if this was really Solstat. Anne was a little nervous, but she admitted he was right. Roads to the north and east, a mine nearby facing the sea, an important transportation hub, that was Solstat. Rene was curious that she used the word was, so Anne went on to explain that things had changed about a year ago. The mine's magic stone production decreased and it was abandoned. A great earthquake hit the southwestern part of the continent and destroyed the port, and there was still no prospect of recovery. Moreover, with the completion of new roads, alternative routes for transport and trade were established. The flow of people had drastically decreased. Ryuji thought it was troublesome, yet it was quite expected. He asked Rene what they should do and if it was okay to process their transfer request. She replied that if he was okay with it, she would be too. Just then, he told her the truth. He actually had a reason why they had to transfer to Solstat. After telling what it was, he asked again if she was sure it was okay to transfer there. Rene said yes, that is, if it wasn't a problem for him. Besides, after hearing his reason, she thought they should prioritize that. She reassured him not to worry about it, so Ryuji thanked her. With that, Anne told them that the transfer procedure was complete. She looked forward to working with them. Rene had the same sentiments, and she thanked Anne. Just then, Rene informed Anne that they were planning to set up a workshop in town, and they wanted to look for a property. In that case, Anne introduced them to an official at the Commerce Guild. Soon after, they met Thor, whom Anne had informed about the situation. As they went to see the property, Rene pointed out that it was quite a walk. Thor agreed that it was, and it was a bit far from the town center. The rent and convenience were good, and it was suitable for a workshop. Finally, they arrived at the property that Thor had proposed to them. Rene said it was big, and Ryuji agreed, pointing out that it was almost too spacious. He asked if they could check inside, and Thor agreed. As they looked around the building, Ryuji asked Rene for her thoughts. She believed it needed some cleaning, but she thought it was a good property. The forest was nearby, too. With that, Ryuji was convinced to take it. He then turned to Thor and suggested making the contract. Thor thanked him, though he didn't expect him to decide so quickly. He then excused himself to go back to the Commerce Guild to prepare the documents right away. He asked if they could wait a while, and Rene said it was fine. Before Thor could leave, Ryuji asked if it was okay if they started cleaning and doing interior work while they waited. Thor allowed it, and since they had decided to go for the contract, they should go ahead and do it. After that, Ryuji and Rene found themselves facing a huge pile of wood. Rene recalled that Thor permitted them to use the materials outside of the house as a thank you for their quick decision. However, they looked heavy. Just then, Ryuji took out the mighty armstone, suggesting that it was the part that it came in. He suddenly picked up a giant log with one hand, shocking Rene. "Is this man a gym membership ad?" Ryuji explained to her that with the magic stone, heavy lifting was no problem at all. In that case, Rene suggested leaving the interior work to her. With her alchemy, making furniture and repairs was a piece of cake. With that, they both decided to get started. Rene went on to create furniture with her alchemy, while Ryuji carried around heavy things that needed moving. With little time, they had made significant improvements to the house. Just then, Thor came in and apologized for the wait. However, he was shocked when he saw the house's interior. He said it was amazing, as they had done that much work in such a short time. Rene was particularly proud, announcing that they had worked hard. After that, Thor handed them the contract. If they found no issues, then they should sign it. Just then, Rene noticed that Thor had a lot of luggage, and she asked if he was carrying vegetables. Thor got shy and admitted it was a bit personal. It was just hypocrisy. Rene seemed confused, so Thor went outside to explain everything. To Rene and Ryuji's surprise, two elf girls were standing behind a tree, observing them from afar. Thor approached them, and he was glad they were both there. He informed them that he brought vegetables, to which the girls thanked him for. Thor then called on Rene to come meet the girls. She thought they were adorable, and she asked who these children were. Thor apologized, as he should have introduced them to Ryuji and Rene. The girls lived next to the workshop, but they didn't have any parents. Moreover, the soil in their garden was poor and crops didn't grow. They were trying their best to harvest even a little, but it wasn't enough. Because of that, Thor had been sharing food with them like that. As Thor was telling them all this, Rene held one of the elf girl's hands, looking up to Ryuji with pity. Ryuji thought about a garden with poor soil conditions, which somehow reminded him of his rough childhood with Manori and Suzu. Just then, Ryuji decided they would use enchantment to make a garden. After all, the possibilities of enchantment were limitless. Ryuji suggested making a field using enchantment, which shocked Thor. He asked what he meant by that. One of the elf girls was confused, as they already had a field. Rene chuckled, while Ryuji rephrased what he said. He asked the girls if it was alright to cast a spell to make the vegetables in the field healthier. One of the girls was curious about the spell, while the other said that making the vegetables healthier sounded good to her. With that, Ryuji walked into the field and found a spot that would do. He buried one of his magic stones in the ground, believing that it should do the trick. Thor asked if he had just buried a stone, and Ryuji explained in detail that it was a magic stone with a specific enchantment. They would see the effects tomorrow, and it would be a nice surprise. Just then, Rene turned to Rana and Rene, the elf girls, and asked them to cast a spell together with her. Rene asked how they could do that, and Rene told them to simply say, "Get healthy." If that spell works, then I'm about to cast Get Rich RN. The girls understood, and together they cast the spell. Elsewhere, Manori demanded that Guy and Sean explain what they did to their brother Ryuji. If he were there, they wouldn't have to struggle with quests and retreat. Guy simply said that he had already told them. Ryuji had left on his own. Suzu argued that it was a lie, as there was no way that their brother Ryuji would leave them behind. Just then, Marie angrily reminded everyone that they should focus on retreating rather than arguing. He called on Sean, telling him to say something. Sean wondered why she wanted him to say something when his body was feeling heavier than usual. It was true that they struggled. Minori guessed it was because they didn't have the sublimation stone. They had been relying too much on Ryuji's power all this time, and that was why they were in that pathetic state. She then pointed at Marie, saying that Guy must have kicked Ryuji out because he didn't want the party's share to decrease, which was why he recruited that miser. She even demanded that Marie admit that she was driven out. Meanwhile, Marie scoffed at being called a miser. Sean stuttered and admitted that Minori was right. Marie was so fussy about the money that the leader had no choice. Marie was annoyed and she couldn't believe he was blaming her. Just then, Suzu reminded Manori that there might be monsters nearby, and they should escape quickly. Manori said she knew that. Just then, she told everyone that she and Suzu were leaving the party as well. Manori urged Suzu to come with her, and with that, they left everyone else hanging. Marie turned to Guy and asked what they should do, but he only told her to shut up and be quiet. All Guy could do was grit his teeth and curse. Later on, Manori and Suzu returned to the guild. They greeted Mr. Emin, who noticed that they looked unusually beaten up. Manori shared that Guy and the others messed up, so they had to retreat. Just then, Mr. Emin said that the others had underestimated Ryuji's enchantment skills. Manori was shocked because the guildmaster knew. Mr. Emin clarified that it was only to some extent. Then he asked about Guy and the others. Suzu replied that they left them in the dungeon, and she and Manori had left the party too. Mr. Emin thought it was perfect timing. Just then, he took out a letter and made them read it. Manori said it was from Ryuji, and Mr. Emin confirmed she was right. He left it with him when he left town, but he couldn't give it to the sisters in front of Guy, so he was sorry about that. Suzu smiled and said that Ryuji was waiting inside. Then she asked Manori what they should do. Manori said the obvious plan, they were going to their brother. The next day, Ryuji woke up after a well-deserved sleep. Just then, someone yelled at him to come outside, which he guessed was Rana's voice. Once he came outside, Rana told him to look at the field. Rene, who had just woken up, stepped out and asked what was going on so early in the morning. Rana was frantic and she told both of them to hurry. To their shock, the once barren field was full of lush greenery. Ryuji was stunned, as he didn't expect it to be that effective. Rina, on the other hand, was overjoyed, announcing that it was amazing. She was convinced that Ryuji's spell was incredible. In just one night, the stone he buried, the Puel stone, promoted crop growth. Rene recognized Puel as the god of fertility, and she asked if he hadn't used that magic stone before. Ryuji said that adventurers were basically rootless, which Rene thought was true. Just then, Rena's stomach grumbled, prompting Rene to make breakfast. She told the girls to harvest some of the vegetables, to which they quickly complied. Ryuji announced that they should start harvesting, hyping them up further. That morning, the girls harvested a decent amount of tomatoes. They assisted Rene in the kitchen, and in no time she whipped up something for breakfast. They gobbled everything up in a snap, making them very full and happy. Rene chuckled as she was glad that they enjoyed it. Just then, someone knocked on the door and welcomed themselves inside. It was Thor, announcing to everyone that he had seen the crops in the field. He asked if that was the effect of the stone Ryuji had buried yesterday. The girls were glad to see Thor, and he was surprised to see them there. Rene told Thor that it was all thanks to Ryuji's magic stone. They harvested a lot of vegetables, and they had just finished having breakfast together. Thor understood now, and he thought it was amazing. He asked the girls if they had eaten their fill, and they told him it was delicious and that they were stuffed. Thor smiled, claiming that it was a relief. Just then, Ryuji apologized to Thor, as it wasn't completely perfect yet. Thor seemed confused, so Ryuji explained that when they harvested earlier, he looked at the soil in the field. It was in worse condition than yesterday. The stone, the Puel stone, promoted growth, but in doing so, it completely drained the water and nutrients from the soil. Eventually, nothing would grow in that soil. In that case, Rene asked if it was now her turn. Ryuji was glad that she caught on so quickly. Then he asked if she could make him a soil improvement potion. Rene said yes, and she could make it with materials found in the forest. Ryuji thought it was great, and he left the task to her. Rena smiled and turned to the others, reassuring Thor that he could leave it to them. Ryuji then told Rana and Rena that he would give the enchanted stone to them, and Rene would take care of the soil. They asked if that was okay, and Ryuji said yes, but in exchange, he asked if they could lend a part of the field to Rene. He explained she was an alchemist who made medicine, so she needed to grow various plants. The girls didn't mind lending the field, but there was one problem. Ryuji asked if something was troubling them, and they revealed that there were wild boars. They were worried about the damage to the area that they would lend to Rene. Ryuji understood now, but he believed it was an easy problem to solve. He then handed the stone to the girls, telling them that there was just the right amount of soil in one corner of the field. After that, they headed to the fields. There, Ryuji used the mudcore stone to create a golem. He named it Spriggan, and he commanded it to drive away any beast that would enter the field and harm people or plants. The golem couldn't talk, but it could mutter sounds like wah, not intimidating when your guard dog sounds like it stubbed its toe. Rene asked Ryuji if he could even create golems with enchantment. He asked if alchemists created things like golems and homunculi too, and Rene said it was true. However, he created one so easily, and it made her feel like alchemists were becoming obsolete. After that, Ryuji turned to Thor, saying that this should solve the field problem. Thor couldn't believe that they did it just like that. Rene then told Thor that he had been helping those two all this time, so she and Ryuji would be helping out from now on. She also pleaded with him not to say things like it's hypocrisy, as it was something to be proud of. Thor was touched by her kind words, and he thanked her. Other than what was left for Rana and Rene, Ryuji wondered if it was okay if they left the harvesting and selling to the Commerce Guild. That way, the two of them wouldn't have to worry about income. Thor agreed, and he volunteered to take care of everything on their end. Rene said it was great news for the girls, and from now on, they would be able to eat to their fill every day. Rana asked if it was really okay for them to do that much, so Ryuji told them that kids shouldn't worry about such things. They should help each other in times of need. He used to be in the same situation as Rene and Rana, and back then, he received a lot of help too. The girls smiled, and they thanked Ryuji and Rene. Now that they had sorted out the field issue, Ryuji asked what they should do next. Rene replied that they could prioritize his business, as he had done so much for them already. Ryuji pondered for a bit, then he asked Thor about the abandoned mine, wondering if it wasn't off-limits. Thor said entry was free, but it became abandoned due to increased magic stone production, so he thought Ryuji wouldn't find anything there. Hearing that, Rene realized that ever since they formed their party, Ryuji had been doing everything for them. From now on, she had to do her best to be of use to him too. Later on in the burn mine, Rene and Ryuji found themselves in grave danger. Rene said she would do her best, but how did it come to this? She called out to Ryuji, but he only told her to keep running. Such explorations always came with unexpected events. On the way to the mines, Rene seemed to have trouble keeping up. Ryuji asked if she was okay, as he had been on edge that whole time, worried that she might hurt herself. Rene reassured him that she was alright somehow. On the bright side, she hadn't fallen yet. She had to do her best, though this wasn't what she had expected. Still, ever since they left the main road and got closer to the mine, the footing had been getting worse and worse. Someone give her a stamina potion or an Uber. Just then, Ryuji said that there was an earthquake big enough to ruin the port. Rene bet that there were even places where landslides had occurred. Suddenly, she said she had something blunt to ask. Why was Ryuji going to such a place? Both Anne and Thor said that the mine had already been abandoned. It was clearly high risk, low reward, though they had been given a map. Just then, Ryuji said that he wanted to take a chance on even the slightest possibility, and that was why he was going. As Rene said, there was a good chance that they would come up empty-handed. But after taking sufficient precautions, he had decided it was worth the risk to go. Rene thought he was right, and so she decided to be useful and do her best. However, in the middle of their journey, they were attacked by a group of ferocious goblins. Rene panicked, but luckily Ryuji was quick enough to use the adamantine stone, blowing away the goblins. Rene tried to use her electric web, subduing the goblins. Ryuji told her to keep them trapped and not let them escape. Then he used his ice bullet attack. Suddenly, huge shards of ice appeared out of thin air, killing the goblins in an instant. Seeing all that, Rene was amazed. Ryuji helped her up and asked if she was all right. She replied that she was, and she was just startled because the goblins appeared so suddenly. She then asked Ryuji if the ice bullet attack was a low-level magic, as it seemed quite powerful. Ryuji explained that it was all thanks to the staff. Rene asked if it was some kind of ancient relic, but Ryuji said no, it was just the jewel decorating the staff. He had enchanted it with sage to amplify magical power. He then asked Rene if she wanted him to enchant her staff too, as it had a jewel on it. Rene was excited, and she allowed him to do it. However, Ryuji suggested deciding what enchantment to use later because it would determine their fate. He then looked ahead, realizing that there was a fork in the road. Rene opened the map and found that to go deeper, they should go right. However, there was a slightly open area to the left. Ryuji wondered which way they should go, so Rene took the initiative to check using her magic sense. If they relied on the sensing results, it seemed there were many goblins to the left. Hearing that, Ryuji suggested that they go left. While they were exploring, they could defeat some goblins and report it to the guild. Rene understood and she was eager to go. Later on, they reached a dead end which was indicated on the map. Rene asked Ryuji how it looked on his side, and he said there was nothing noteworthy. He thought it was definitely a dead end, and even though the output had decreased, he thought that if they checked with detection magic, they might find something, if not a new vein. However, he was starting to think that he might be wrong. Suddenly Rene noticed something, so Ryuji asked what it was. She quickly informed him that there was light leaking through the wall. Ryuji was alarmed, knowing that forcibly breaking the wall might cause a collapse. Hearing that, Rene told him to leave it to her. Just then she called upon the spirit of the earth and released her magic upon the area. With that, Ryuji commended her for a job well done. She then explained to him that she just loosened the soil around where the light was leaking. Suddenly, Rene realized that she had just discovered a path that didn't exist before the mine was abandoned. She thought that the big earthquake created a path that wasn't on the original map, connecting to a space deeper inside. The soft soil in the surrounding walls supported that theory. Ryuji commended Rene and she awkwardly laughed. After that, they ventured through the new path. Rene thought it was incredible and Ryuji agreed. It was clearly different from the path they had been on, and ores were glistening everywhere. This could mean that there was a high possibility of an undiscovered ore deposit ahead. Rene was starting to feel a bit nervous, so Ryuji reassured her that if there was nothing here after all, that would be interesting in its own way. However, Rene argued, saying that she wanted to report good results to the guild. With that, they ventured deeper. Just then, Rene found herself blinded by something bright. To their surprise, the whole cave glowed with bright ores, which was something Rene couldn't believe. She recalled that Ryuji had said it was worth the risk to go there, but she couldn't help but wonder how he knew it would be like that. However, if Ryuji were being honest, he didn't expect results that good at all. This was a better harvest than he expected, and if they reported this to the Commerce Guild, they might even get an extra reward. Rene looked around, exclaiming that it was beautiful. Ryuji also observed the ores nearby, and he noticed that the quality was excellent too. Moreover, once word spread that such a large vein had been rediscovered, there would be a possibility that the magic stone supply from Solstat might resume. Just then, Rene told Ryuji that it looked like the path continued further ahead. Ryuji said she was right, and Rene asked if they should go a bit further. However, Ryuji said no, as they had already achieved more than enough. Considering the risk of collapse, they should stop there for now. Rene understood, and she asked if they should head back. As they did, she wondered if they could check if there were any other similar places, and Ryuji agreed. However, Ryuji noticed something, and he swiftly pulled Rene closer. A huge boulder smashed at the spot where she was standing earlier, but Ryuji had saved her. Rene was shocked to see the massive rock. That boulder was about to speedrun her life into the credits. Meanwhile, Ryuji asked if she was hurt. He had given Rene the adamantine stone as a precaution, but against the power of that boulder that just flew at them, adamantine would be useless. Usually, Rene would have noticed by the sound, which made Ryuji wonder if she mistook it for a distant noise due to the echoes in the mine. More importantly, someone threw that rock with clear hostile intent. Just then, a gigantic creature emerged from the darkness. Ryuji smirked, realizing that it was the culprit he had suspected. The creature stepped forward, its malicious aura wavering through the air. Ryuji guessed he was a goblin hero, and he asked if he was the boss of the group. Just then, Ryuji turned to Rene, asking her for her staff. Rene was confused, and she asked if he was planning to fight. The opponent was likely a second-rank monster or higher. However, Ryuji already knew that, and he was counting on Rene for support. The goblin hero didn't seem like he was going to let them leave quietly. Just then, the goblin hero summoned its underlings, commanding them to attack. Rene did her best to beat them, but she soon realized that there was no end to defeating them. Ryuji apologized, but he needed Rene to hold out until they could do something about the big one. Rene was annoyed, as it had been the same thing over and over. It was common for high-ranking monsters to have underlings, but this one was different. Even when Ryuji slashed it repeatedly with a dagger enchanted with sharpness, he couldn't inflict any significant damage. He could blast it with his magic stone, but considering the risk of a cave-in, it was too risky. Even though the goblin underlings were decreasing, at this rate, they would be worn down. Just then, Ryuji was caught by surprise when the goblin hero released an attack toward him. Luckily, he narrowly dodged it. With the goblin hero's power, even adamantine wouldn't be able to withstand it. In that case, they couldn't let this drag on any longer. If they could just stop its movement for a moment somehow. At that moment, Ryuji had a bright idea. He could enchant the broken rocks with wind magic called whirlwind. He did just that, rendering the goblin hero vulnerable to the tiny pebbles getting into its eyes. Nothing is too petty if it works. The goblin roared in anger, which made Ryuji smile, as it should be enough of a distraction. He then turned to Rene and told her that it was her chance. Rene immediately jumped into action, calling upon the magical elements to gather beneath her and pierce the goblin hero. With her lightning strike, the goblin hero was enveloped in gigantic thunderbolts, electrocuting it. As all of this went down, Ryuji thought that along with the surrounding goblins, it must have surely made an effect. However, to his shock, the goblin hero only smiled at them, unscathed and ready for revenge. Rene thought there was no way. Her attack didn't work. The goblin hero had a necklace that had anti-magic applied to it. In that case, magical attacks were useless. His dagger's enchantment was also counterproductive and ineffective. Rene was no good either. She thought about using potions since magic didn't work, but all she had were explosives and potions. If she had known, she should have brought a potion that could freeze it. Hearing the word freeze made Ryuji realize something. They still had that option. And with the dust cloud in the back, his reading could be correct. As the goblin hero prepared for its attack, Ryuji asked Rene if she could use magic to loosen the wall's earth and stop the creature. He suggested halting its movement and proceeding deeper inside. Rene thought it was fine, but she was worried about going deeper because it could be a dead end. The goblin hero lunged forward, but Ryuji told Rene not to worry. He told her to trust him, as their fates were tied together. Rene flashed a skeptical look, but she had no choice but to trust Ryuji. Just then, she summoned the spirits of the earth to loosen the ground beneath the goblin's feet. She then cast her mud trap spell. With the goblin hero immobile, Ryuji threw a magic stone at it. He urged Rene that they had to run, which confused her. Ryuji grabbed her hand and only told her to run because she might freeze to death. They kept on running until they finally reached the exit. Rene was surprised to know that there was an exit on that side, while Ryuji was relieved that it was just as he thought. He had felt the wind blowing inside the cave earlier and had a hunch. It looked like his guess was right. Just then, Rene mentioned the magic stone that Ryuji threw earlier, and she asked what it was. He replied that the magic stone was one of the ones he showed her on the way to Solstat. It was the power of the severe cold stone. When activated, it could freeze the surroundings with light and cold air. This reminded Rene of the goblin's anti-magic necklace, and she wondered why pure magical power was ineffective against it. Just then, Ryuji told her that she was probably misunderstanding enchantment. She seemed confused, so Ryuji explained that enchantment was indeed magical, but its power often appealed to and invoked the laws of nature. Unlike magic that stemmed from human inner power, enchantment was more like a technique that applied natural forces. Rene now understood that it was a branch of magic, yet it used natural forces, which were similar to alchemy. Ryuji confirmed that she was right. Then he suggested heading back inside. However, Rene was worried that the effects of the severe cold would still be there if they went back now. Ryuji then introduced the heatwave stone, and he also believed that the power of severe cold should have been weakened by now. Once they confirmed that the goblin hero was dead, they could use heatwave to disperse the remaining cold air. Rene was a bit stunned, realizing that he had many convenient items as an alchemist. Bros, a walking Home Depot. With that, they entered the mines again, and they were greeted by the goblin hero, frozen in ice. Ryuji thought it was quite the ice sculpture, and Rene agreed, though she didn't think it would be that extensive. Just then, Ryuji started collecting the magic cores from the goblin hero and its underlings. The magic core was quite literally the core of a monster. Then, as originally planned, they would map out the mine's interior and head back to the guild. Later that day, Rene and Ryuji headed back to the guild. Rene greeted Anna and she welcomed them back. Anna heard that they went to the burn mines, then she asked if they found anything. Rene replied that they surely did, and they even found a new vein. Anna seemed stunned, so Rene confirmed it once again and added that they had mapped out the chart. Ryuji also said that they had collected magic ores from the mines. Anna was amazed by the quantity and size of the magic ores. She asked if there were hobgoblins there too, but the two said that there was a goblin hero. Anna couldn't believe what they said, so she asked them to wait a moment as she clarified everything. She recalled that a new vein was found and that there was a goblin hero. The other people in the guild were intrigued, and they quickly gathered around Ryuji and Rene. They were astounded that a new vein was found, and more importantly, they were curious about the goblin hero's magic core. They wondered if Ryuji and Rene had defeated it. They showered the two with compliments, calling them amazing. One person said that with a new vein, Solstat might be revived. On top of that, Ryuji and Rene defeated a strong monster too. Ryuji and Rene only looked at each other, silently smiling as everyone praised them. Just then, Anna said that she would certainly accept the items that the two brought as the results. However, as these were outside their standard procedures, they would have to review and consider the reward, which they would provide at a later date if possible. Ryuji was fine with that, and he asked Rene for her thoughts, to which she also agreed. Furthermore, regarding paying a reward to their party, Anna brought up that they hadn't registered a party name yet. As Ryuji came to think of it, they had forgotten with all the hustle and bustle. He then asked Rene for any ideas, so she pondered for a bit. Just then, she said that it was a word in an ancient language that meant artisans. With that, all procedures were complete. Ryuji thanked Anna for everything and he apologized for any inconvenience. However, Anna argued that they should be the ones thanking them for their great contribution. As they had seen with the guild members, this could be the trigger for Solstat to regain its former vitality. Hearing all that, Rene was glad. Anna believed that they were the saviors of the town and they would be counting on them again. She also looked forward to their future endeavors as the two members of Altena. Ryuji and Rene smiled at each other and playfully did a fist bump. After that, they headed back to the workshop. Ryuji asked if they should rest for the day, and he also wondered what they were going to do tomorrow. Rene replied that she wanted to buy some more ingredients, so Ryuji decided to go to the market for it. Just then, someone was glad to see Ryuji. It was Manori, and she had finally found him. Ryuji greeted his sister, and he guessed she must be tired from her long journey. Suddenly, Manori pointed out that he had just left a letter and suddenly disappeared. However, Ryuji dodged the question and only asked where Suzu was and why she wasn't with her. Manori explained that she had something to do and would come later. Just then, Manori saw Rene and she remembered that she was mentioned as the Alchemist acquaintance in the letter. Ryuji asked if they were familiar with each other and Rene said yes, mentioning that they had worked on requests together before. When Marie joined Berserk, Manori thought it couldn't be. She thought it must have been tough, but Rene only laughed awkwardly at it. Just then, Rene said that thanks to Ryuji, she was able to pursue a new goal now, so it was okay. Manori smiled as she understood. Just then, she remembered something that she wanted to discuss with Ryuji. Since arriving in that town, she had met some people who were looking for him. It turned out to be Lady Setsi and Diet, the ones who were attacked in the forest. They apologized for their sudden visit, but Ryuji said it was fine and only wondered what brought them there. Diet turned to Lady Setsi, and she stepped forward to speak. She apologized to Ryuji and Rene for not introducing herself properly the previous day. She was the first princess of the country, Cecilie Raiffeisen von Beistein. As expected, Ryuji and Rene were surprised. Just then, Lady Setsi revealed that she had come that day to make a request to both of them. Everyone started gathering materials for Princess Setsi's request. Ryuji told the princess that they could handle the gathering for her, but she argued that the client couldn't leave it to others. Just then, Manori called out to Ryuji, informing him that she had found some. In fact, she found a lot. Ryuji commended her, but he told her that this was a secret request from the princess, so they had to keep it quiet. At that moment, Ryuji said that they had to do their best too. Back when Princess Setsi and Diet first came to the workshop, they were welcomed by Ryuji and Rene. They sat down for a cup of tea to discuss matters. Princess Setsi thanked them, but she told them to be at ease because this was an incognito visit. Diet, who was now more trusting, told Rene that he would have some of her tea. Just then, Ryuji went straight to the point, asking Princess Setsi about her request. Diet wanted to explain it to him, but Princess Setsi cut him off, insisting that it was her request. She wanted to explain it herself, so Diet backed down. Firstly, she informed Ryuji that what she was about to tell him must never be spoken of to anyone else. Ryuji understood, then he asked Manori and Rene if they would be okay with it. Manori reassured him that she would do her best while Rene simply said yes. With that, Princess Setsi revealed that recently her father had fallen ill. Rene was shocked to hear it as Princess Setsi's father was His Majesty the King. The princess added that the information hadn't been released to the public, but currently her father was bedridden with illness. Rene now understood and she asked if Princess Setsi's request was about medicine. The princess confirmed it. Then she shared that they had doctors in the royal capital of Lautager examine her father, but they couldn't identify the illness at all. That was when she remembered Ryuji and Rene, and that was why she had come to make her request. Ryuji remained silent, though he finally understood the situation. Just then, Rene told Princess Setsi that she was honored by her words, but without knowing the symptoms, she couldn't accept. She then asked the princess to tell them in detail what symptoms His Majesty was showing. Princess Setsi cooperated and she told them the symptoms. Upon hearing it, everyone was stunned into silence. Manori turned to Ryuji, asking him if he had figured something out. Just then, Rene broke it to Princess Setsi that it was not an illness. Shocked, the princess asked what she meant. Rene explained that the symptoms she described were not from an illness but from a curse. At least it's not prostate cancer? If the princess had shown him to a priest or an adventurer, they might have figured it out. However, it would be difficult for a doctor to diagnose. Princess Setsi was horrified to know that it was a curse, and then she suggested hurrying to the church. She also apologized for taking up their time. Just then, Ryuji stood up, saying there was no need for that. He claimed that they could handle the curse removal with enchantment. Princess Setsi was intrigued, so Ryuji made her understand that the curse placed on His Majesty was not a particularly powerful one. For that level, they could easily remove it using a curse-breaking stone. However, he didn't have one on hand, so they needed to make one. Princess Setsi asked how long that would take, and Ryuji replied that they could gather all the materials in the forest behind them, which would only take one day. Princess Setsi clenched her fist as she understood. Then she told Ryuji that she was counting on him. Later that day, they all headed to the forest to collect the materials. Ryuji asked Rene how it was going on her end, and she replied that it was going well. However, there were boar droppings in the thicket close by which were from a slender boar. Manori was surprised that she could tell the type of boar just from its droppings, but Ryuji had already expected this from an elf's sense of smell. However, Rene preferred not to smell it if she could avoid it. Having an overly keen sense of smell could be a drawback. She really out here doing Sherlock Holmes but with nostrils. Just then, Princess Setsi asked what kind of boar a slender boar was. Rene replied that it was a large boar, but as the name suggested, it was also slender. It was timid and nocturnal, so the danger level was low, but caution was still necessary. Ryuji thought Rene was right and it might still be nearby, so they should all be careful as they explored. Later on, Diet arrived with a cart full of herbs. He asked if it was enough, and Rene said yes. They had already secured extra, so they shouldn't run short on materials for a while. Just then, Diet pointed out that earlier, Rene was also collecting clay, and he wondered if it was used for something as well. Rene said yes, and she explained that it was an excellent ingredient for medicine. Diet was amazed, and he realized that alchemy was truly profound. Rene said that it wasn't just alchemy, but it was also used in pharmacy too. It could be made into medicine to regulate stomach issues. Princess Setsi overheard that and said it was perfect for Diet as he often complained of stomach pains. She asked him to try it and he embarrassingly said he might. Not Diet having a weak stomach when his name is literally Diet. Ryuji happened to be eavesdropping and he thought Diet had it tough. However, Manori told him that he wasn't any better. Just then, Rene smelled something, so she told everyone to stop. Ryuji asked what was wrong, so she told him that she could smell animals and blood. She pointed to the distance, saying that it came from beyond those bushes. They followed the scent, and to their surprise, it was a slender boar. Rene confirmed that it was a carcass of the species, and judging from the wounds, it was a large beast that killed it, probably a bear. However, Rene noticed that there was something strange. The boar carcass was too clean, and if it were a bear as they suspected, it should have been eaten more thoroughly. Manori already had a good guess, and Rene confirmed she was right. The predator was still in the middle of feeding. Just then, Diet took out his shield, surprised that a bear was within their midst. He received the impact of the attack, and the sheer force sent him back. Diet and the others were alarmed, but Ryuji seemed excited. Before them was a massive bear, looming over them with a menacing look. Just then, Manori lunged into the air, swinging her sword at the beast. To her shock, she didn't even know what this thing was, as it was very hard. She hit it and her sword got PTSD. Ryuji couldn't believe it as he just witnessed Minori's slash. If it were just a normal beast, its arm should have been cut clean off. He was now stuck, wondering what was going on. Then, to his horror, the bear had a stone on its chest, suggesting one thing. Ryuji told Princess Setsi to step back, as they were dealing with a synthetic beast. Synthetic beasts were beings created by alchemically combining one or more animals, enhancing their abilities and turning them into monsters. Normally, in any country, these should be kept under the management of mages. This made Ryuji wonder which idiot allowed such a thing to get loose. Just then, Princess Setsi refused to obey Ryuji, insisting that she was not just someone who needed protection. She turned to Rene, suggesting that they combine their efforts. Rene agreed, and she summoned the magical elements to gather to her and pierce the bear. Meanwhile, Princess Setsi summoned the arrow of flame, commanding it to blaze forth upon the bear's face. Finally, Rene used her lightning strike attack, and Princess Setsi used the fire arrow. They unleashed their powers, striking the bear directly. Ryuji was impressed by their aim, but he was surprised to see the beast still standing. This synthetic beast also possessed magical defense capabilities, and their attacks had no effect at all. He now wondered what they should do. Suddenly, Rene told Ryuji that she had an idea. After telling him what it was, Ryuji suggested that they try it. Rene then told Diet, whose real name was Dietrich, to buy them time for the enchantment. Man went from Diet mode to Diet rich. Diet took out his shield, telling Rene to leave it to him. After that, Rene told Manori to aim for the bear's hind legs to stop its movement. Just then, Ryuji told the girls that the sharpness enchantment was done, and he was counting on them. After that, Manori ran in Diet's direction, telling him that she would take over. Manori released a barrage of attacks, and finally she managed to slash the beast's hind leg. Ryuji signaled Rene, and she thanked him for it. She then took out one of her potions, and she told Manori and Diet to step back. Without wasting time, she released a whirlwind enchantment called Molotov. The bear was immediately engulfed in flames, and it screamed in agony. Diet shielded his face from the force, and he wondered what this power was. The whirlwind enchantment on that explosive before was manipulated to reduce power and control directionality to avoid seriously injuring the opponent. However, the whirlwind enchantment she just threw was specialized solely in amplifying power. Even if it didn't hurt the bear, it should be enough to stop its movement. Just then, Ryuji took out the anti-magic stone, believing that it would finish off the bear. He released the stone and it covered the bear's head in a slimy material. Princess Setsi was surprised to see a slime, so Rene explained to her that Ryuji had shown her the stone before, which had a monster sealed inside. Ryuji then commended Rene for her brilliant idea. No matter how resistant the bear was to physical or magical attacks, once its nose and mouth were covered, it would be over. The bear really lost to the DIY facial mask. After that, Ryuji collected the bear's magic core, but he was left wondering what that thing was. Some foolish alchemist or someone who got a synthetic magic core from them probably tried it out on a bear. Rene suggested reporting it to the guild, but Ryuji pointed out that they still had to make the curse-breaking stone. This meant they didn't have time to go to the guild. Just then, Manori joined the conversation, and she volunteered to go to the guild. They wanted to make it quickly, and she needed to submit the transfer notice to Solstat anyway. She would take care of the aftermath too, and she asked Ryuji to lend her the adamantine stone. Ryuji thanked her as she was being a big help. With that, he turned to Princess Setsi, telling her that Manori would take care of the bear while they returned to the workshop. Upon arriving, they started making the stone right away. Rene told Ryuji that she was ready, and so they began. The alchemist and enchanter were finally going to show their skills. Ryuji and Rene had gathered enough materials, and if they started right away, they should finish by evening. Just then, Ryuji told Rene that it was time for the alchemist and enchanter to show their skills. Before they started, Diet asked if magic stones would be made from the rocks they had. Ryuji confirmed it, adding that the raw material, the void stone, would first be cut out with a special knife. Then, using a catalyst, they would apply heat which would imbue the stone with power. Next, they would use a whetstone to shape it thoroughly. Finally, they would polish it to fine-tune the shape, which would give the stone its luster. By doing that, they could use it as an effective magic stone. Diet understood now, but he still had a question. If Ryuji imbued power after cutting, was the polishing step really necessary? He wondered if it would become a magic stone at the cutting and shaping stage. Ryuji explained to him that without the final polishing, it wouldn't release enough power. Each step increased the completion level of the magic stone, so they couldn't skip any of them, especially for stones like the curse-breaking stone, which had effects that could impact human life. The enchanter's skill would become particularly evident. This made Ryuji wonder how much power they could imbue. As craftsmen, their skills were constantly being tested. After shaping the stone, Ryuji carefully examined it and decided it was good enough for the process. He placed the catalyst and the cut stone in a heat-resistant dish. Then he applied heat with his magic. Just then, the stone glowed, and the catalyst plant withered. With this, they had successfully imbued power into the stone. With the initial step complete, there was still much to do, cutting, shaping, and polishing the stone until it was ready for its true purpose. At that moment, Ryuji called out to Rene, informing her that he would begin the final enchantment on the bottle soon, and that she should notify him once her potion was nearly complete. Rene gave a short nod of acknowledgement and returned to her task. Just then, Diet approached her and asked what she was making. Rene explained that she was making a health recovery potion. Even if they broke the king's curse with the curse-breaking stone, it wouldn't heal the accumulated fatigue or lost vitality. She thought that her medicine could help alleviate that. Princess Setsi believed that it was a very effective medicine. Apparently, it could be made from Narelli grass. Diet asked if it was the herb that was good for nourishment and invigoration, and Rene confirmed it. They would powder it, mix it with distilled water, and then strain it. The strained liquid would be adjusted through alchemy, and when distilled at 70 degrees Celsius to 80 degrees Celsius, it would become a health recovery potion. Diet understood, and he realized that using a familiar herb as an ingredient instantly increased the sense of safety. Princess Setsi said he was right, and she added that it was even used in teas sometimes. Ryuji then shared with everyone that he and Rene had a long process ahead of them, so they should wait patiently. Princess Setsi said that this was their request, and she told Ryuji not to worry about it. Besides, Diet was thrilled to see their craftsmanship. With that, Princess Setsi bowed before Ryuji and Rene, pleading with them to do their best. Ryuji and Rene smiled at her, and they reassured her she could leave it to them. And so, Ryuji worked on the stones while Rene brewed her potions. The task went on endlessly until it was finally finished. Rene praised Ryuji for his good work, and he asked her about the potion. She replied that it would be done once he applied the enchantment to the bottle. Hearing that, Ryuji praised Rene for her work. Rene said that it was nothing, which somehow reassured Ryuji. After that, they approached Princess Setsi and Diet, and they apologized for keeping them waiting. Diet asked if it was complete, and Ryuji said yes. Just then, Ryuji presented them with a chest. Princess Setsi was amazed to see the curse-breaking stone, and she thought it was beautiful. Diet smiled as he had the same thought. The curse-breaking stone had 58 faces. Its left-right symmetry and optical structure created an overwhelming beauty when it captured light. It was made in the shape said to maximize the stone's effectiveness. Ryuji then promised that the radiance emitted by the stone would purify the king's curse. Ryuji clarified once more, making sure they understood. Those were the instructions, and using the magic stone was simple. They just had to infuse it with magical power. That alone would activate it. After hearing all that, Princess Setsi said she understood. Suddenly, Rene handed a box to the princess, telling her that it was medicine that could be administered orally. Ryuji had applied the quick recovery enchantment to amplify the medicine's effect, so she could promise it would be more potent than usual. The princess took the box from Rene, and she genuinely thanked her. Rene then told her and Diet that if it wasn't too much trouble, she asked them to stay in the workshop for the night. It was already late, and given the earlier attack, there was no telling if bandits might strike again. Princess Setsi agreed without hesitation, accepting their offer of shelter. Just then, Manori busted through the door calling for Ryuji. She was out of breath, which somehow worried Rene. Manori suddenly dashed towards Ryuji, handing him a letter. Ryuji was confused, and upon opening it, his eyes widened in shock. Unfortunately, it wasn't a Hogwarts letter. It was Suzu's writing, and all it said was help. The next day, they immediately traveled in a carriage to look for Suzu. Manori wept and said that it was her fault. If only she had waited for Suzu and gone together. However, Rene comforted Manori and told her not to blame herself. Ryuji worriedly looked at his sister, knowing that she had been like that since the previous night. But ultimately, he was the cause because he chose to leave the two of them behind. After all, he left the town first. He should be the one to be blamed. They were both more capable than he was, and their combat experience and the situations they had handled were impeccable. That was why Ryuji thought it would be fine. Now he couldn't help but wonder if he was too naive. However, he also considered that Manori had the same thought, and that was why she chose to act separately. In other words, that letter indicated the possibility of a situation beyond their expectations. Manori probably understood that too, and that was why she felt so responsible. Since they didn't know what was happening to Suzu, they had no choice but to head there as soon as they could. The letter was sent from Bayhammer, so she was probably still in that town. Despite the urgency, Ryuji still felt that this sudden turn of events was quite rude to Princess Setsi. Thankfully, the princess was kind enough to reassure them. She reassured them that if it was an emergency, then they shouldn't worry about her and diet. She even suggested preparing horses for them, but Ryuji rejected the offer and insisted on taking the first group carriage in the morning. The princess understood, so she told Ryuji to accept her next kind gesture. Ryuji asked what it was, and she explained that it was an invitation with the royal seal. If they were heading to Bayhammer, she wanted them to come to the royal capital, Laudinger, on their way back. There, she would properly set up an occasion to thank them. Just then, Ryuji snapped back into the present when Rene called him. He asked her what it was, and she handed him his portion of the food. Ryuji thanked her, but then he asked about Manori. Manori said she wasn't hungry, so Rene made her understand that if she didn't eat, she wouldn't be able to move when it mattered. Ryuji agreed with Rene, then he recalled the words of their teacher. If you want to accomplish something, sleep well and eat well. Manori fell silent, then she said she understood. She silently ate her food, but she complained about it being salty. Ryuji joked, telling her that it was because she was crying. Food was supposed to be seasoned with love, not depression. After a while, the group drew nearer to the borders of the Dea Kingdom. At that rate, it would still take some time to reach Bayhammer. Just then, the coachman was forced to stop, leaving the group wondering what was going on. There was a landslide because the western mountain collapsed. One traveler asked if they couldn't pass through, while another complained that they still had urgent business in Dea. Everyone was wondering if there wasn't anything they could do. Rene thought it was troublesome, and she asked if they had to proceed on foot from there. Ryuji preferred not to do that, but Manori said that they didn't have time to wait for it to become passable. Just then, Ryuji flashed a determined look, saying they just needed to move it. Rene asked if he meant carrying the rocks, but Ryuji said no. Even with the mighty armstone, that would be impossible. Considering that, they had to use another method to move those rocks. This was the perfect time for a reliable man like Ryuji to show his true worth. A few days ago, Suzu was sitting silently by the window when someone suddenly called her. It was Guy, accompanied by the other members of Berserk. He asked her where Manori went, but she only told him she was reading a magic book and even warned him not to just barge into her room. Furious, Guy told her to answer the question. Suzu calmly replied that Manori left town the other day, and she didn't know where she went either. She then told Guy that if he understood, then he should get out. Offended, Guy called her a little brat and asked who she thought she was. However, Suzu bluntly told him that was her line. Guy might call himself the party leader, but he and his group just forced their way into their party. Ryuji and Manori were always running around and cleaning after him, and yet, he asked her who she thought she was. Guy was the one who needed to get a clue. Suddenly, Guy smacked the book out of Suzu's hands, shocking her. She worriedly said that the book was borrowed, but Guy didn't stop there. He forcefully slapped Suzu, making her nose bleed. That wasn't a slap, that was a system reboot. He then lifted her by the collar, telling her to listen and not be too cocky. As Suzu grunted in pain, Marie suddenly intervened, telling Guy to stop it because there was no need to go that far. However, Guy still argued that she was the brat at fault. He then told Suzu to take him to where Manori went, as he hadn't accepted them leaving the party yet. Just then, Suzu said that leaving a party was an individual's choice, and she and Manori had already submitted their notice to the guild. Suzu refused to yield, which somehow challenged Guy. He then called Sean, telling him to go rent another room at the inn. He planned to keep torturing Suzu until she would spill the information. Time passed, and Suzu wondered when she was first brought into the room. With the windows and doors shut tight, she couldn't tell what was happening outside at all. She sat silently, feeling the hunger inside her. She remembered the words of their teacher, telling her to eat properly and sleep properly. She had broken her teacher's instructions again, and she got absorbed in the magic book. If it weren't for that, she wouldn't have gotten lost to Guy, even with that surprise attack. The real villain wasn't Guy, it was bad time management. More importantly, her body was getting weaker and weaker, and she needed to move while she still had strength left. Just then, she slowly crawled towards the door, pressing her ear against its surface. There was no sound, which meant there was no guard as well. She quickly cast a spell chanting, "Reflect my body, my flesh," which enabled her to use a duplication. The duplicate was weak and not good at detailed tasks, but she should be able to handle writing a letter. With her duplicate being on the other side of a door, Suzu commanded it to write a letter without being found by Guy and the others. She needed it to be delivered to Ryuji and Manori. Just then, the duplicate disappeared, and Suzu wondered if it had truly gone. Now, all that was left was for Ryuji and Manori to receive the letter. 10 days after departing from Solstat, Mr. Emin talked to the guild's receptionist, asking if certain information was true. Just then, Ryuji, Rene, and Manori came running inside, calling out to him because they had something urgent to ask. Mr. Emin was surprised to see them return. However, Ryuji had no time for formalities. He asked Mr. Emin if he knew where Suzu was, but the man seemed clueless. Ryuji then informed him that something had happened to Suzu. Suddenly, someone was shocked after seeing Ryuji. When Ryuji looked back, he saw Sean staring right back at him. Sean quickly tried to run for it, but his frantic reaction made him seem suspicious. Bro's face had subtitles. Suddenly, Mr. Emin told Ryuji to come with him, as he had an idea where Suzu might be. After that, Mr. Emin revealed that he received a tip. Someone saw Sean and a restrained Suzu coming out of a room at an inn. The guild couldn't intervene every time there was a dispute between adventurers without proof, but it was different if family got involved. The receptionist was consulting him on how to handle the tip-off, but seeing Sean's reaction earlier, it was likely true. In that case, Mr. Emin suggested heading to the inn to confirm the facts. After heading to the inn, the group finally arrived at a certain room. Mr. Emin guessed that Suzu was probably being held captive in there. Just then, Ryuji knocked on the door, asking Suzu if she could hear him. Manori suddenly called Ryuji, telling him that she had explained the situation and had borrowed the key from the inn owner. They quickly unlocked the door, calling out Suzu's name as they opened it. To their horror, Suzu was lying motionless on the floor. Manori and Rene quickly rushed to her, asking her if she was okay. Just then, Rene reassured Manori that Suzu was sleeping. Hearing that, Manori longingly took her sister in her arms, crying as she apologized. She was very sorry for leaving her alone. Rene then informed Manori that Suzu was severely weakened, so they needed to give her some nutrients. Just then, Guy appeared, angrily calling them out for barging into the room. Bro mad like, "How dare you interrupt my crime?" Marie stuttered when she saw Rene, while Rene looked at her innocently. Guy angrily asked Ryuji what he was doing in his room, and he commanded him to get out. Ryuji was seething in anger, muttering Guy's name. Guy prepared his weapon and cockily asked Ryuji what was up with the look he had. He was sure that a third-class enchanter couldn't take him on. However, Ryuji only told him that he still couldn't judge people by anything other than ranks and jobs. Guy was a fake second class who couldn't even complete requests without magic stones. He then coldly warned him to stop yapping like a puppy. As the tension grew, Mr. Emin intervened and told them that was enough. He turned to Guy, reminding him that he would be demoted to third class if he caused another disturbance. Worried, Guy told the guildmaster that this was because Ryuji entered the room without permission, and he didn't do anything wrong. Suddenly, Mr. Emin asked him to explain what happened to Suzu, but Guy couldn't answer. Just then, Ryuji told Mr. Emin not to stop him as Guy was beyond reasoning now. Mr. Emin sighed in frustration, knowing that he wouldn't listen to anything he said. Then, he suggested something. Both men should go outside. They would have a duel, with Mr. Emin being the witness. Okay, children, settle it with violence. Later on, Suzu slowly opened her eyes, much to Minori's joy. Rene asked Suzu if she was awake, and sure enough, she recognized them. She seemed confused to see Rene, so Rene reminded her that they had worked on a request together before. Just then, Suzu wondered where they were, and Rene said that they were at the training ground behind the guild. Minori added that Mr. Emin had suggested that Ryuji and Guy have a duel. By settling disputes in public, the guild could prevent similar troubles in the future. Guy wouldn't be able to easily go back on a promise made in a duel. She also believed that Ryuji would win and that everything would work out. Before the duel, Mr. Emin confirmed the conditions once more. If Guy won, Manori and Suzu would continue their activities as part of Berserk. Ryuji would also be banned from entering Behemer. If Ryuji were to win, there would be compensation for the mental and physical suffering of Manori and Suzu, which would be 500 gold coins. Guy's punishment would also be a 2-rank demotion to 4th-class adventurer. Mr. Emin asked the men if those conditions were correct for both parties, and they said yes. Just then, Guy told Ryuji that if he wanted to beg for his life, then now was the time. However, Ryuji only told him that he was a pitiful man. With that, Mr. Emin declared that the duel would now begin. Ryuji was determined to end it all with his fist.